Hi, welcome back, Glen. How are you? How was your holiday break?
I'm doing great, Michelle, and I had a great holiday. Most people, take the holiday as a holiday. I don't. I actually do my best work because it's not really work for me. It's my passion, right? So I don't
Yeah.
draw a distinction between work and life. To me, it's life, right? And so I spent the time actually developing the outline for my new program. So
Mhm.
I'm developing a completely new program, Michelle, which I'm going to be announcing tonight at the Q&A session. That's at 7 p.m. in Sydney time. 7 p.m. Yeah, 7 p.m. Sydney time. And then I'll also be announcing it at 8 p.m. when I have the session, the Conscious Leadership Collective session at 8 p.m. So I'll be announcing what I'm working on that I hope to have finished by the end of this month. So my holiday was really a time of sitting down and planning and developing new programs that I'm going to launch early this year. And so it's a great time. I had a great time.
Busy, busy. And today being the 10th of January, 23. So if you're watching this recording, you'll be able to find the link for tonight's video as well. So
Excellent. Yes.
today, Glenn, you'd like to provide us with some insights into why New Year's resolutions failed. And more importantly, the real question is what does work if people are looking to consistently achieve their goals?
Yeah, we can't tell people why it's not going to, why New Year's resolutions don't work and not provide a better solution, right? And so I actually feel I'd like to go one step further than why New Year's resolutions fail. I'd like to say they're a complete waste of time. And so don't be disgruntled. But the statistics really bear out what I'm talking about here, Michelle, and you don't have to look too far to find that only about 41% of all people actually make New Year's resolutions. That means that really 59% or really 60% thereabouts can't be bothered. So they're not using that time of the year to make any resolutions of any kind whatsoever. So 41% of people are actually making New Year's resolutions. And wait for this. You ready for this? 91% of all those people, 91% of those 41% of people give up their New Year's
I've
resolutions
been
within
there.
the within the first 6 weeks. Most people give up in the first week. And so, of that 91%, the vast majority of that 91% give up the New Year's resolution in the first week. And so think about that. That's only about 9% of people that actually follow through. And we don't know we don't have any research or insights into how many of that 9% actually get to completion. I would suggest it wouldn't be much. It'd probably be, a few percent maybe. So we're talking a couple of percent of 41% of New Year's resolutions that actually may well come through to completion. And so it's a pretty small number, actually. And that's why I'm saying it's a complete waste of time because the statistics bear. But I also want to talk about, I want to dig into this a little bit further and talk about why this doesn't happen and what the kind of process is. So this is my view, this is my research, my opinion, and I did research it and research it very well. And so let's just have a look at this, right? So most New Year's resolutions are really pretty superficial, which means they're hastily developed. They're usually driven by the ego, the whims of the ego. And my simple definition of the ego is me, more, and control, right? That's the ego game. And so the resolutions are really kind of focused on what's going to give me comfort. What's going to provide me with recognition, what's going to give me status and fame and fortune, all those kinds of things, right? And so the ego is running the show when it comes down to these things. They're not really anchored in anything more meaningful such as your true higher self, your true higher vision and purpose. And the key there is vision and purpose. You know, they're not anchored in something that's way more meaningful. And so what happens when they're not anchored in something way more meaningful, Michelle, is there's no intrinsic motivation. What's intrinsic motivation? Internal motivation, which means that I'm driving this thing. And so most people, most ego-driven goals or objectives or resolutions, whatever you want to call them, are usually based on extrinsic motivation or external motivation, which means I need something outside of myself to motivate me to keep going. And what's outside of myself? Well, people recognizing me achieving this and therefore adoring me, or, you know, I get status out of it, or I get fame or fortune, those things out of it. That's the extrinsic motivation. And extrinsic motivation has been proven to not really work very well at all in terms of sustainability, you know, actually, or persistence, you know, keeping going. Now, let's keep going with this. So further, hasty New Year's resolutions rarely have any planning associated, which means that people come up with the resolution, but they don't attach a plan to it. And so, you know, you'll remember in previous sessions, we've gone through CVS to BVS. Remember what that was, Michelle? The current version of the situation, you know, assessing the current version of the situation, assessing what a better version of the situation really is, which is where the resolution resides, and then having a plan to achieve that. Now, most resolutions don't have any planning. They don't go through that thinking. They don't say, well, what's my current situation, you know, around the starting point of wanting to achieve that resolution. The better version of the situation is the resolution, you know, what I can actually achieve there. And what's my plan to get there? And so, you know, with most resolutions, there is no plan attached. And most resolutions are not developed around the SMART approach to creating a resolution. So what is the SMART approach? Well, SMART's an acronym which means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, timely. SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And so then again, now let's just add this to it. So most people don't write resolutions around the SMART context: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, timely. And so now let's add to that a little bit more. There's usually no metrics around these things as well. You know, there's no, people don't have any milestones to track their progression or whether the thing's actually been completed. And so you see what I'm stacking this on top of each other, it just gets worse and worse. And then I think there's very little responsibility, because when it comes to the ego doesn't really take a committed responsibility to something, because it's the ego that's driving it. And so therefore that kind of loses out on responsibility, committed responsibility, which also, has a lot to do with being persistent. And so it's kind of the shiny object syndrome. You know, it's like, I really want this, you know, for next year, and I'd really like to achieve this, and I'd really like to have this, and I'd really like to do this, and I'd really like to be this, and all those kinds of things. That's ego driven. And usually the other thing, now I'm adding another kind of layer to this, usually the resolutions are just way too big and way too soon. It's like, you know, it's this whole thing about people having very high expectations of immediate gratification, but they're not doing any work to get there, right? And so, you know, too big, too soon, which means they're not realistically achievable. And so when you have these high expectations of immediate gratification, and because it's ego-driven, means it lacks inherent belief. And so a key factor of achieving things is that you must believe that you can actually achieve it. And belief is a powerful part of this equation that I'll talk more about as we go forward. And so immediate gratification not being achieved. So when the results don't come pretty quickly, well, that's what causes people to give up, you know. So a good example of this is, my favorite example of this is when I was going to a gym, which I don't go to anymore. I just set up my gym downstairs in the garage. But when I was going to the gym, it would always interest me with January, because you'd see January, the gym would be absolutely packed, right? I mean, it's like all these new faces, seeing new people. The gym is a hive of activity. There's all these people and they're all pumping big iron, right? I remember one guy in particular, I'd never seen him before in the gym. He was quite a little guy, a little frame. He went straight into the bench press and he started lifting the heaviest weight he possibly could. And of course, all sorts of things were happening, right? People were having to pull the weight off him because he got stuck with the bar on his neck because he was trying to lift too much weight. And so that was a classic example of a guy who had never been to the gym before, really consistently, came into the gym and decided that he was going to lift all the weight and that he was going to be a bodybuilder and that he was going to look amazing in 2 weeks. And of course, it didn't happen. And so I think I saw him maybe 4 or 5 more times. Then he disappeared. And by the middle of January, the end of January, 90% of all those people that turned up at the beginning of January were gone, and we never saw them again. And the gym kind of went back to, the key people who I'd always seen there. It's like I see these people every day, every week, week in, week out, the whole year. They're always there. They're consistent. They keep training. And of course, with their consistency, they get results. But the New Year's traffic was just packed. And then, of course, according to the statistics, in alignment with the statistics, 95% of those people, if not all of them, are gone by the end of January, and you never see them again. And the funny thing is, the gym industry loves it because those people,
they do.
Yeah, they pay 12-month memberships and then they never come back. And so, what happens when this happens, Michelle, this kind of, case I've been building here for why these things don't work, and it's all based on psychology, much of it, is that when the results don't come, people do give up, and they kind of rationalize that they didn't think they really wanted it anyway. And so this is what happens. This is kind of post-rationalization, which is, well, you know what, I didn't really want that anyway, so the fact that I didn't achieve it doesn't really matter. That kind of substantiates to me and everybody around me that it's no big deal. But the thing is, that's not what happens actually in the brain. The brain doesn't stop quietly going into thinking about why that wasn't achieved. And that kind of evokes self-doubt. It evokes feelings of guilt, shame, self-blame. And this kind of leads to various forms of self-sabotage. And so this is a psychological fact. And so the fact that all of these people are doing New Year's resolutions can be actually quite negative in nature. It can lead to a cycle of negative, repetitive behavior where any goals that are made, go through the same process. And that process that I've just outlined is enacted time and time again. And it's why people never really achieve what they set out to achieve, because it's ego-driven, because they don't have it anchored into something that is much more meaningful, a higher kind of reason for being that's attached to their true higher source self-identity, and that evokes them not to be committed and not to, follow through, not to have a plan of action that they consistently work on every single day. And so, that's a kind of my little overview as to why New Year's resolutions or in fact any goals beyond New Year are not really achieved because of that process. Now, I want to introduce something else here, Michelle, which is a little known fact. And so it's the timing of the thing. It's like New Year, right? New Year, the 1st of January is the beginning of the new year. Well, it's not for actually a lot of people on this planet. For example, in most regions of India, the new year in the Hindu calendar starts on the new moon before the sun enters the zodiac sign of Aries, right? And so that's on or around the March equinox, which is March 21. And so around 1 billion people are celebrating the new year in March. 1 billion people on this planet. So their new year is March. Now, the Persians do the same thing. They celebrate the same thing. They celebrate their new year around March 21. And so do Iran and the Middle East and the Balkans and the Black Sea and Central and South Asia. They're all celebrating New Year at a very different time. And
So
of
their
course,
gyms are busy. Their gyms are busy in the March, April.
that's right. That's right. And even the Russians, their Orthodox calendar is a week later, and so they celebrate New Year on the 7th of January. And so that again is really quite different. Now, the thing is, how did this all come about? Because I want to kind of share with people who are watching today a little bit of the history around this, right? And so from my research, I found that this kind of all began with the Roman king Numa Pompilius. And now he was king, from 715 to 673 BCE. Now, that was when he revised the Roman Republican calendar so that January, wait for it, January replaced March as the first month of the year. He did it, right? This is the guy, right, that's responsible.
Because I can.
Yeah. And then in 46 BCE, Julius Caesar, he made some changes himself, and he called it the Julian calendar, right? Julius Caesar, the Julian
That's
calendar.
where that comes from.
That's where that comes from.
And just before you go on, so what's the E in BCE? Before Christ, is it? So what's the E?
Yeah, it's before Christ. I'm not sure what the year is actually, but they seem to be using that instead of BC. I'm not actually. I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out. And so,
yeah. Julian calendar.
Good question.
Julius Caesar.
So Julius Caesar, in 46 BCE, he made some changes. Again, but he retained January 1 as the beginning of the year. And so then with the expansion of the Roman Empire, we know the Romans were, hell-bent on taking over the world. They continued to use the Julian calendar, and that spread with the Roman Empire. And so whatever countries they conquered, they introduced the Julian calendar to those conquered countries. And now here we go again. It was then revised in October 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII. Now, he revised the calendar to incorporate leap years. Would you believe it? And then guess what Gregory did? Of course, he named the new calendar after himself, and he called it the Gregorian calendar. Yeah. So that's where that comes from.
It's a great little history lesson. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, the Gregorian calendar is now used in most parts of the world. Yet the thing is, and they've kind of retained January 1 as the beginning of the year. Yet the thing is, March was really the first month of the year. And if you look at, it really interests me that they didn't change the names of certain months to align with what they'd done, with March being the first month, with January being the first month of the year, right? And so if you look at months like September, what does sept mean? Sept.
7.
What does sept mean?
7, isn't it?
7. And so September is meant to be the 7th month of the year, but it's actually not. In the Gregorian calendar, it's the 9th month of the year. October, what's oct mean? Oct means 8.
8, sorry.
Yeah, oct means 8, yes. Right? Octagon, 8. And so oct means 8. So October should be the 8th month of the year, but it's not. It's the 10th. And December, what's dec mean? Dec. 10.
And even 9.
So December means 10. Dec means 10. And so decimal, right? 10. And so that should be the 10th month of the year, but it's actually the 12th. And so they didn't go into they didn't go into the detail, right? They didn't say, you know what, we need to change this as well, because so we can align this with, the fact that we've now made January the first month of the year. So, the whole point of that story is, January, March, what's the best month to do that? And I would argue this, Michelle, there's no specific time of the year that is the right time to actually do resolutions. And why would they be resolutions anyway? And so I don't even like the idea of resolutions. And so now let's get into what actually does work, Michelle. This is really interesting. And so I'd reframe or rename resolutions and say, I'm not going to call them resolutions anymore. I'm going to call them passionately held intentions. Intentions, passionately held. What's passionately held means? It means I'm really passionate. I'm really enthusiastic. My energy is really around this. So it's not ego driven anymore. And when you start to develop passionately held intentions, for these to be realized or fulfilled, they really need to go back. We need to go back to that point I made earlier, which is they really need to be anchored to something that is much more fundamental and inherent and purposeful and meaningful to you and your life, your identity, your reason for being, rather than your flighty, shiny object-driven ego self. And so this is a big point. Not resolutions, but passionately held intentions that are anchored in something that is fundamentally, inherently purposeful and meaningful to you and your reason for being on this planet. And so what does that mean now? Well, what I'm talking about here is that you first need to, before you develop any objectives or any goals or any intentions, I prefer to call them intentions actually. Before you do that, you really need to kind of go back and say, well, I need to discover my vision, my true higher vision, my purpose, my reason for being, my true higher source self, who I really am and why I'm really here. So that's the key beginning point. What your divine identity is, your reason for being here on this earth. That's really important. That's the starting point, right? And so, and that's the biggest challenge for most people, because most people, with all due respect, most people don't really know what that is. I talk to a lot of people every week, every month, and I have a tendency to ask that question first. The first question I ask is, tell me about yourself. And the answer I normally get is that somebody defaults to their occupation. They say, well, I'm a plumber, or I'm a, psychologist, or I'm a CEO, or I'm, whatever their title is. And they default to that as their identity. Well, of course, that's not their identity. For a start, it's just a title, and it's what they do. And I'm not diminishing what people do for a living. It's what they do for a living. What their chosen calling, their career is very important, of course. But the title of that is not who they are. That's not their identity, just as their personality is not their identity, just as where they live is not their identity, or their culture, or, any of those things. That's not their identity. We're talking about, their identity focusing on, what they agreed to before they came to this earth to do here, and who they really are as their divine self, their true higher source self, right? That's what I'm really talking about. And so the vast majority of people can't answer that question. That's why I kind of state it's important to do that work first and foremost. And of course, Michelle, as you know, and as probably anybody who knows me in the collective knows, and beyond the collective knows, that's what I do. That's the work that I do. I help people to discover their true higher source self, their divine vision, purpose, and unique identity. How to be that kind of conscious leader, what I'm now calling the quantum conscious leader, and how to make that their everyday reality. And of course, when that happens, and then people start to develop what their intentions are, when they start to develop what their intentions are, well, my view is they're aligned intentions, by the way. They're aligned intentions, not ego-based intentions, but when they align their goals or their intentions with that true higher self, which is grounded in their true higher purpose and meaning for life, then it's really interesting what happens, Michelle. Magic happens, right? Beliefs magically align. I believe I can do it because I know who I am and why I'm here. It increases commitment and responsibility. You have massive commitment and responsibility because this is your reason for being. It enhances intrinsic motivation. In fact, intrinsic motivation goes through the roof right? It's like, I don't need any external motivation. I don't need anybody's, approval or anybody to look at me and say, come on, we really need you to do this, because I'm doing it myself. I'm relying entirely on myself to get up every morning and say, man, I'm attacking this thing. I'm going for it because this is why I'm here. This is who I am. I know who I am and why I'm here, and I know what I've got to go about doing. And so it also means that, you'll develop a plan of action around it, because you'll sit down and say, well, I'm actually going to make this intention a smart intention. So we're back to smart, right? I'm going to make it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, timely. I'm going to do my CVS to BVS. I'm going to look at my current version of the situation. I'm going to look at my ideal version of the situation, my better version of the situation, which is really where my intention lies, my passionately held intention. And I'm going to put a plan together around that. So I'm going to make that happen. And so now, of course, this takes a little bit of work, right? And this is what's required. If you want to be able to say, I know who I am and why I'm here as my true higher source self, my vision, purpose, and unique identity. And then when I develop my intentions, they're in alignment with that. And then what I do is I go about developing my plan of action around that. Then magic happens. I kind of look at that and say, when you do that, and I'm going to go through, for people, I'm going to go through the process in a minute. I'm going to summarize what this process is so that everybody's very clear about it. But what happens then is there's an inevitability about achievement, right? There's an inevitability about achievement. And that's not a small statement. That means when I have a passionately held intention, that I am very enthusiastic, that my energy is wrapped around, that I believe to be true, that I believe and know I can achieve, no matter how big it is, then I go about aligning my actions to that, Michelle, then it's an inevitability that you will achieve it. It's an inevitability. I know it. I see people doing it all the day. The people that I work with are doing it all the time. I'm doing it all the time. There's an inevitable, I hear Quantum Brownie talk about this. He said it in a meeting yesterday. He said, it's interesting when we put our minds to something and we have intentions and, we decide that we're going to achieve it. It's funny. It always happens. I mean, that was Brownie said that. And I went, yeah, well, that's right. Isn't it funny we wanted that to happen and that happened? Isn't it funny we wanted that to happen and that happened? Well, this is what we're talking about. I mean, it's in action, right? In the collective, with the leaders of the collective, that they're sitting down and going, we're really passionate about what we want to achieve. We actually believe and know we can achieve it. And then we go about taking action every day to make it happen. And what happens? We achieve it. And then we kind of move on to the next intention, don't we? Right? I mean, this to be true, right, Michelle?
Oh, it's been an amazing journey. What we've achieved since March last year is just extraordinary.
And, the process that I'm talking about, is that resonating with you?
Oh, definitely. It speaks for itself. There's no doubt.
Let's go through the process, because I want to make sure that people who are watching this are absolutely clear about what this process is. So step one is really about discovering your true higher source self, your vision, your higher vision, divine vision, purpose, and identity. That's step one, because remember, we don't want this driven by ego. We want this founded in something that is incredibly, inherently meaningful to your reason for being, purposeful and meaningful to your reason for being here on planet Earth, right? Now, the second thing is to get clarity and focus around your passionately held intention. And a good way to do that is to utilize the SMART format, right? What is the SMART format? Can you remember the SMART format, Michelle?
Don't do that to me.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. I wasn't testing you there. It was really a rhetorical question. So that's number two, right? Number three is to elevate your emotional energy around it. Be passionate, enthusiastic, which is kind of natural because this is an inherent part of who you are and why you're here. And then to match that with belief. You believe it to be true. It's belief is a very powerful thing. I believe that once you believe something to be real and true now, it creates incredible power that goes out to the quantum field of all potential. And that quantum field then responds dutifully to manifesting or materializing that reality into your life. And so when you put that belief, that intention out with inherent passion, high vibrational energy and belief, and then go about taking action. And that's the fourth point, right? So remember, number one is to discover your true highest self and your purpose and identity. Number two is to get clarity and focus around your passionately held intention, write a smart intention. Number three is to elevate your emotional energy, your passion and enthusiasm, and to believe it to be real and true now. Number four is a definitive plan of action to achieve your intention, and then going about, applying that plan every day in a state of joy and in a state of gratitude. Executing your plan in a state of joy and in a state of gratitude. And then and then number five, this is an interesting one. And then number five is being able to let go of it, right? There's a lot of people get desperate around this stuff. And of course, desperate is being desperate to achieve and to get this immediate gratification is negative emotional energy. It's like a circuit breaker. And so it's kind of let go, or as Dr. Wayne Dyer used to say, let go and let God. Allow the quantum field of all potential, allow divine providence to play its role. Have faith, trust that this is going to happen, because you're in the process of making this happen. Inside this process, you're in the process of making it happen. So let go and let God. Allow the quantum field, allow divine providence to take over and make this stuff your material reality, your everyday experience. And so when is the best time to do this? Right now. I mean, every day. I kind of, I said to somebody the other day, they said to me, oh, happy New Year, Glen. And I said, well, for me, it's like Happy New Day. I mean, I wake up every day and I'm grateful I'm here. I've been gifted with another day. This is brilliant. Now, what am I going to do with it today? So January 1 means nothing to me, to be honest. What means everything to me is today. And so I'm going to go about reviewing my intentions today and making sure my plan of action to achieve those intentions and all the other things I talked about are all happening in unison today. And so that means every single day of all 365 days, if that's actually the calendar, are all about in this state of kind of intention fulfillment, Michelle. And every single day is about intention fulfillment. So when is the best time to do this? January 1, March 1, March 21, whatever? No, today. And then every single day after that. And so what's going to happen to those statistics? They're going to go through the roof. You're going to find that, if people are doing this, they're going to have 100% success rate. Let me say that again for everybody. 100% success rate if this is the process you go through. 100% success rate. Manifestation becomes an inevitability. And that's when you start becoming the magician of your own life, the creator of your own life. The creator, which you are, by the way. We're all divine sparks of creator, which means we are creator. We're all creator. And so therefore there's a process to creation. And I've just outlined it for you. There's the process for creation. So forget about New Year's resolutions, forget about all those other, old world 3D matrix rubbish that clearly from research don't work. So why would you do it? Move on and, take on this process. And when you do take on this process, my promise to you is that your achievement will become an inevitability. You'll become the magician of your own life, the alchemist of your own life. So there we go, Michelle. How's that?
Wow, that's food for thought, that's for sure. And you know, it's obvious that's how you have to
It's
do it.
obvious, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. You sit there and look at it and go, oh man, it's so simple. It's like, yes. When you step back and you find these things out, you go, it's so simple. And so, yes, it is simple, but you know what you've got to do? You've got to do the work. I mean, there's just no getting past it. I've kind of outlined the steps in terms of achieving what you want to achieve in your life, which is everybody's divine right, Michelle. Everybody. There is no discrimination here. It's every human being on this planet can do this if you want to.
Yep.
You just got
It,
to say, make the decision, commit yourself to the action, and go about doing it, and really commit and say, I'm just going to do this. Right? I'm going to take Glen to task here, and I'm going to put myself through this program and this process. I'm going to make it happen. And I tell you, you're going to, on the other side, you're going to be sitting down and going, well, he got it right, because I know it is right, because,
yeah.
I've done it myself. I've done it with many leaders and many members of the collective already, and it works. It works every time. And it's no mystery. There's no secret. This is what happens. This is the way it works.
And we've heard for years, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah. And the plan is a part of it, but it's not, there's no one aspect of those 5 steps, I think 5 they were, that I provided today, that, are any more important than the other. They're all important. We're talking about, a symbiosis of activity here, a way about doing things that just works, right? It just works.
Collectively, all those things together.
Yeah, all those things. There's nothing in there that's kind of mutually exclusive. You can't, if you take one element out, then what happens is it doesn't work. It's like
Yeah.
you've broken, the chain, and now the chain is weak.
It's like any healing plan. It's not one thing that works. It's the combination, and
It's
there's
holistic.
and yes.
It's holistic, right? And so, if you're going to do these things, you've got to do them in a holistic way, which means if you take shortcuts, or if you say, I don't really want to do that first step, then sorry, that's what's called self-sabotage. You're sabotaging yourself because you're trying to take the easy way out, or you're trying to stay in the comfort zone. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. You've got to commit to going through the process, like anything. It's like, to me, in my martial arts days, people would turn up and want to do, 3 or 4 weeks as a white belt. Then they want to be a black belt. It's like, I want my black belt now. How do I get my black belt? And it's like, well, come on and join the black belt class and let's see how you go. I mean, they don't last a minute because they haven't got the skills. They haven't done the work. They haven't done the training. They haven't been through, all the mistakes and all the other things where they've seen, oh, I've learned from that. Now, how do I move forward? And so they haven't done the work. And so it just doesn't work that way. And, as with martial arts, as with everything, so above, so is below. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. You've actually got to be able to say, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to commit myself to it, and I will get the results. And when people do that, they get the results. It's awesome to see.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your insights again with us today. And we can put your links down below for how to contact you, and to further information on what you do. So yeah,
I'll even put a link down to our CVS to BVS.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
that people can have a look at that as well. So no
Yeah.
problem, Michelle. They'll be able to find everything in the links below.
All right, thank you. So thanks for watching, everyone. Please subscribe so you're up to date with all the collective videos, and we'd love to hear your feedback or questions in the comment below. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.
Thank you, Michelle. Bye for now.